You are welcome to my channel. Thanks for visiting. Today, we'll continue on schistosomiasis, but I'll be limiting myself to life cycle and transmission only. Without further ado, let's go. We'll be dealing with two types of hosts, the definitive host and the intermediate host. The definitive host is where there will be sexual reproduction and the life cycle of these parasites will be completed. The human host, particularly children, will bear the burden of the worm. And it's going to start gradually or insidiously, and it's going to be building up. When it comes to the adolescent age, then more of it will manifest. That doesn't mean it's not affecting adults. No, it does. We'll know in a bit. It is commoner in rural areas than urban centers. Why that? We'll know later on. At certain altitudes, it's going to thrive more. Then it is prevalent in endemic zones of the world, but travelers from the non-endemic zones are not out of the wood. Later on, when we are learning more about Schistosoma hematobium, we will know that there will be problem with renal system. You can see the kidney, the adrenal gland, the ureter, the bladder, and urethra. I will go through all these later on. Then we will also learn what is going to happen to Schistosoma mansoni, Japonicum, Intercalatum, Mekongii, and the rest when it comes to how they affect gastrointestinal tract. You can see the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine. I will talk more about that later on. Now, the zoonotic host. Still definitive host, right? This is just to point out that it is not only human that will be the definitive host. We can see can be in cattle, giraffe, pig, horses, goats. Other animals will include water buffalo, sheep, rodents, equine generally, camel, and some wild ruminants like deer and antelope. The first stage will be the eggs. And we're not going to obtain the eggs from the store. The eggs will be coming from the definitive host. And how will the definitive host give us the eggs? It's going to come through the urine in case of Schistosoma hematobium or its hybrid, Schistosoma hematobium bovis. Then the eggs could come from the feces. In that case, we'll be dealing with Schistosoma japonicum, Schistosoma mansoni, Schistosoma intercalatum, Schistosoma mekongii, Schistosoma guinensis, and Schistosoma mariensis. And sometimes it could come from the hybrid of Schistosoma hematobium, that is Schistosoma hematobium bovis. Through that, we can get eggs from feces. I'll put something here that when it comes to schistosomiasis, it is egg specific. I'm not saying the type of eggs you get from the store. I'm not a good artist. This is just a rough sketch. You can make research and get more files on that. When it comes to the eggs, you can actually use the position of the spine and the shape to determine the definitive diagnosis of the type of the schistosoma problem you are dealing with. In the case of Schistosoma mansoni, you could see where the spine is, lateral, right? While Schistosoma hematobium will have terminal spines. Schistosoma intercalatum, Schistosoma mekongii, and Schistosoma japonica. So with the shape of the egg and the position of the spine, you can make definitive diagnosis that you are dealing with a specific type here. For the eggs to be part of the life cycle, it must be found in a particular place, not on a piece of paper, not on dry soil, not along the road or on top of the tree. It must be in fresh water. In fact, not by the beach, not salty water. No, fresh water, ponds, canals, lake, pools that are constructed and getting source from fresh water. Yes, the snake could pass through that into such a pool. I'm not talking about pools dug in the house and then you fill with carbon water. No. Could be found in streams and springs. The viable eggs found in the right habitat, in this case fresh water, will hatch into the young worm, in Greek, Miracidia, meaning youth. Plural is Miracidia. Initially, it will be pear-shaped, but as it grows, it will lengthen out or elongate as it grows. It will be covered with many hair-like structure called cilia, and that will also have sensory organelles. These larvae will be viable for up to a week, 7 days. The main event that will occur here is to penetrate the intermediate host, that is the mollusk. We'll go into the different types very soon, okay? And we'll start 2 stages in the snail, the mollusk. And that will be mother sporous cyst to daughter sporous cyst. Now the intermediate host. Just as the name implies, this is not the end of the road. This is just coming in between, okay? In this case, we need the snails as the intermediate host. Specific type will be found in specific type of mollusk. So the intermediate host is the organism that a parasite can use as part of his life cycle. And here, the only thing that will take place is asexual reproduction. There is no sexual reproduction here. And there is no maturation into adult. No, it's not going to happen here. So the life cycle is not yet terminated. So it's in between. So let's go. What the parasite will need as intermediate host will be the snail. The intermediate host that we want, like I've said, will be snails, right? But not all types of snails. The snails that we want will not be the land snails like Acacatina, but the Acacatina can be of help. We'll go into that in a bit, but mostly will be found in fresh water. I'm just depicting it here. No, snails are not actually here. I have written it down here that it is snail specific. many particular genus of Schistosoma and species will be found in a particular mollusk. For example, Bulinus species, that's a mollusk, will be hosting Schistosoma hematobium and Schistosoma intercalatum. So when you find this species of the snail, then you'll be suspecting Schistosoma hematobium or Schistosoma intercalatum. But when you find this species of the snail, Oncomelania species, then you'll be suspecting Schistosoma japonica. But when you find Bionfalaria, then you should be suspecting Schistosoma mansoni. Tricola species will be hosting Schistosoma mekongi. Now, I've shown you the example of the land snail the other time, Acacatina fulica. That is not common as intermediate host when it comes to schistosomiasis. But in 2010, a report came from Venezuela that the land snail Acacatina fulica was playing host to Schistosoma mansoni. Remember that we're still in the intermediate host. Now, sporocyst. How do we get it? The Miracidia. Remember I said earlier the Miracidia will penetrate the snail, particularly the soft parts of the snail, not the shell, the cilia to swim, and so on. Now, already in the snail, cilia is no longer necessary for swimming. So they will lose that and then become something else. What would that be? Mother sporocyst. The mother sporocyst will undergo asexual reproduction, okay? And then a large number of daughter sporocysts will be formed, all inside the snail. Within the snail, the daughter sporocyst will move into the liver and the reproductive organs of the snail. And there they will undergo more growth and development. In about 1 month, they are going to release hundreds of another larvae called secari. And that will be released into the environment under the influence of sunlight. The end of asexual reproduction in the intermediate host is the production of secari. Then that will be released from the snail into the environment. And this time you have known where the environment is likely going to be, okay? And that will be under the influence of daylight. And the process must have taken a month, if not 1.5 to 2 months. The lifespan of this larvae is not so long. It's just about 1 to 2 days, maximum of 3 days, and it must be in water. So if it is found on land, which I doubt, but let's assume that between the time that the eggs were dropped in fresh water or lake or ponds, there was drought before the carrier is formed, then there won't be any progress to affect humans. So, infections to human will occur within 2 to 9 hours after being released into the fresh water. It can swim with the help of the tail. The description is that it has forked tail. Some will use the word bifurcated tail. Then they can penetrate the skin and attach to the hair follicle. And then from there get to the epidermis, the dermis, and so on. Later on, they will shed the tails off, leaving us with the head alone. That egg will undergo transformation into endoparasitic larva called schistosomiasis. This will then be the form that will spread or be disseminated through general circulatory system into the entire body. But upon reaching the liver, then they will undergo full maturation into adult worms. And that will take about 2 to 8 weeks. Some authorities put it as 6 weeks. The transmission. How can we become infected? Well, from what we studied in the life cycle up to this stage, we need fresh water, right? The last stage we discussed was about Zoonotic that could penetrate the skin of human being, mitochondrial follicle, through the epidermis, dermis, and then gets into the circulatory system from the vertex and venous. Now, we have to either be swimming, bathing, canoeing, scuba diving, rafting, skiing, or kayaking in the water. Note this. The water or the habitat that is contaminated with the larvae Zoonotic must exist before we can be infected. The specific mollusk that is formed in that water will determine the type of the schistosoma we'll be dealing with and the type of the infection we'll be battling with. Let me explain first. If we are dealing with fresh water with Bulinus species, then we can be expecting Schistosoma hematobium to be found there, and then we will then have the clinical features of hematuria and the likes after all. So the type of snail will determine the type of the schistosoma we'll be dealing with, and then the type of infection we are going to come down with. Remember I said the Zoonotic will penetrate human skin, and this is the structure of the skin. You could see the epidermis, and then going down to dermis and the lymphatics and blood vessels. Now, we are still on the life cycle. We have reached the final or definitive host, which is human. Now, penetration has occurred. Now, what is going to happen in the human being? The schistosoma, that is the transformed head of the Zoonotic, after the tail has been lost, will then get into the lymphatics or the veins, then spread hematogenously to the liver, and it's going to mature in the liver to male and female adults. There's an entity called vesica venous plexus that will be the target of Schistosoma hematobium. I'll tell you more later on. Or mesenteric venous of the small or large intestine, or even the mesenteric venous of the colon in the case of Schistosoma mansoni, japonicum, intercalatum, mecongi, guinensis, and maliensis, even Schistosoma hematobium bovis hybrid, causing problem in gastrointestinal tract. The eggs would then be released through the human urine or stool back into the water later. But I'm not going to cap it that way. Let's go. Now, the schistosoma. Singular is schistosoma. Now, depending whether you are in Europe or North America, it's either schistosoma or schistosomiasis. In that case, The cercaria has penetrated the skin, the tail has been lost, now the head has undergone transformation, forming schistosomia. Like I said, the skin has been penetrated, the tail has been lost, the head has now been transformed to the schistosomia. And that is the form that will get into the lymphatics, the general circulation that will be taken to the liver. Now, I put it there to just depict blood cells. Now, to those who are not familiar with the way the heart works, I've decided to put it here that the blood from the different parts of the body will return to the right heart. From the head, the neck, upper part of the body will come from superior vena cava and it will drain into the right atrium. From the lower part of the body and the abdomen, the blood will return to the right heart through inferior vena cava and will also be dumped in the right atrium. When there is adequate pumping, the blood, because I say adequate because there may be atrial fibrillation sometimes, the contents here will empty into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it will be pumped into the pulmonary artery, heading to the lungs. It's called an artery because it's taking blood away from the heart. From getting to the lungs, there will be reoxygenation, and the blood will return to the left heart via pulmonary vein. It is called a vein because it's bringing blood back to the heart. Then that will be emptying into the left atrium. When there is adequate contraction, again I repeat because there may be atrial fibrillation. So with the adequate contraction, the content will be pumped into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it will be pumped into the aorta. Ascending aorta, the arch of the aorta, then to the head and neck region, and then descending aorta to abdominal aorta and the entire body. This is just to let you know that the circulatory system we made mention of, there's a big organ that is helping us in managing. Now, we've been talking about liver where the full or final maturation will take place. This is the structure of the liver. Now, the full maturation would have taken place in the liver. Then we'll have the adults. Adults, male and female, will form a couple, and the two of them jointly move against the polar blood flow. But before I move further, let me remember to state here that the adult worms can live for as old as 3 decades, 30 years. So they will move against the polar blood flow to either the mesenteric venues of the small and large intestine, that is, if it is Schistosoma japonicum or Schistosoma mekongii. The final destination may be mesenteric venues of the colon, that is, if we are dealing with Schistosoma mansoni and Schistosoma intercalatum. But the final destination will be vesical plexus for Schistosoma hematobium. The males will appear friendly and will be accommodating to the females through a groove that the males will possess. We call that gynecophoric canal. So that is where the females will be residing permanently. In 1 to 3 months, the female will lay a large number of eggs, hundreds of them, in their final abode, either the vesical plexus, in the case of Schistosoma hematobium, or mesenteric veins in the rest. The eggs will then migrate to the lumen of the respective niche that they found themselves. Either in the case of Schistosoma hematobium, the eggs will be found in the lumen of the ureter or bladder, or in the case of the other species, it will be found in the intestine or intestinal lumen. Through that, it could be excreted into the environment via the urine, in the case of Schistosoma hematobium, or feces, if it is the rest. Then it depends on where the eggs will land. If it lands in fresh water, then the cycle continues again. But if it lands, on dry ground, on top of the tree, on the soil, or in the toilet where it could be flushed, then the cycle ends there. I just want to quickly go over some things, like you just want a quick, recap, right? That the definitive organs that will be affected will determine the specific disease or diseases. Like if the final destination will be vesical venous plexus, then we'll be dealing with genitourinary tract trouble, as we found in Schistosoma hematobium. If the final buster will be mesenteric veins, then we'll be dealing with gastrointestinal tract issues, and some other organs will also be involved. So, in the case of vesical venous plexus as the last buster, we'll be battling with hematuria. In that case, you could see the kidney, the hematuria. When we start talking about the signs and symptoms, we'll be able to define it fully, like either it is initial hematuria from urethra, is it total from the kidney or ureter, or it is terminal from the bladder. We'll define all this later on. So if the final bus stop is mesenteric veins, then we'll be dealing with issues around gastrointestinal tract. Other organs will also be involved, like the lungs, because there is pulmonary schistosomiasis. We're dealing with Neuroschistosomiasis affecting the brain. We'll also have trouble with the spinal cord, like myelopathy will occur, and we'll go into details when it comes to the signs and symptoms. The other organs that could be affected will include both male and female reproductive organs. And that is why part of the signs and symptoms or clinical features or complications will be infertility. Why that? And how can we get there? I will explain further when we are handling the clinical features of schistosomiasis. Lastly, this life cycle could either continue or end based on if the eggs will be found in water, particularly fresh water, through urine in the case of Schistosoma hematobium, or feces in the rest. Or it's going to end there if it's not found in fresh water or the appropriate habitat where the intermediate host could be found. So If it is found in fresh water with appropriate intermediate host available, then another cycle will start again. The viable eggs will hatch into Miracidia, then be looking for the host and penetrate, and then forming mother sporocyst, daughter sporocyst, carrier, and then come out of the snail again, looking for human being to penetrate, forming schistosomiasis and the rest. But I wish for human race that anyone already infected with these parasites will have the waste from them, urine or feces, in the toilet and flushed away, or in some other parts of the world, thrown into the bush, as the case may be. Or at least, even in acidic water or salty water, it will not be able to thrive, or in an environment where the specific mollusks will not be available. And that will end the cycle. That is my desire for human race. But before I'm going to end this, I will let you know that the knowledge of the life cycle will help us to present and manage accurately the prevention and control of this disease. We'll be able to understand the clinical signs and symptoms perfectly, because it will be surprising that when it comes to clinical features, the eggs will give us more trouble than the adult ones. We'll understand later on. Epidemiology, and to cap it up, the treatment. This very life cycle will guide us appropriately how to handle all these different other topics about schistosomiasis. With that, for now, let me say thank you for listening. Be on the lookout for the rest topics on schistosomiasis. Please share with all your friends. I appreciate it.